As requested, today we're going to be looking at Land of a Thousand Fables, which is a good choice because this card has some very interesting properties. So, first of all, it's a 10 provision artifact location, and it has resilience as a location, so it will stay over for another round. And it has deploy, play a special card from your deck, and order transform a special card in your hand into a random unit of the same provision cost from the same faction. So there's really two effects here, and we're going to talk about them separately for a minute. So we have first, deploy, play a special card from your deck. This ability is, by itself, it's pretty good. The issue is it's just not as good as other options. So if we look at the play cards, right, the first thing that comes to mind is you've Ownermancy, which will play any card from your deck with Echo, so you can do it twice. Really good, nice to have that, really good card. And then the other one we compare it to is a Royal Decree. So Royal Decree plays, that's not Royal Decree. This is, play a unit from your deck. Okay, so playing a unit from your deck, we have play a unit from your deck, we have play a special from your deck, and play a card from your deck. For one provision more than Royal Decree, you can play any card from your deck that is a special card, not a unit, and you also have a bonus effect. So why is Land of a Thousand Fables not played? There's really two reasons here. We're just talking about this deploy ability. So, playing any card and playing a unit are both much better than playing a special card. And the reason why is most decks don't rely on special cards. So they're not focused around one special card. Whereas a lot of decks actually do require, for certain rounds, you get a specific unit out. So, for example, if you're playing Skellige, maybe you're playing Royal Decree and Ownermancy because you need Melusine, for example. There's not a special card that defines a deck. I actually can't think of any, other than maybe Uma's Curse and Shoop. Those are the only times you might play Land of a Thousand Fables. If you need a special card that your deck's defined around, Shoop's probably the best example here. You might want to play it for Shoop. Okay, and the other part about this, though, is that if we look at the other cards that play special cards, it's not the only one. And if you look at a specific faction, let's go to monsters, for example. We're going to look at all the special cards monsters have. Look, Organic, 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 Wild Hunt, Organic. You see a theme here? This isn't Alchemy, by the way. We're not counting the Runestone because no one plays that. But every single other special card in this entire faction can be tutored by a card that isn't Land of a Thousand Fables. Either Gels or Wispus. And then if we look at the other factions, Nilfgaard has a couple spells you can't tutor, so Invocation and Dead Man's Tongue, but everything else is pretty much a tactic, which is tutored as well. You can play Menno and get those. Northern Realms, again, they have a spell in Sabrina's Inferno. Kind of weird how there's some spells thrown in here. Forbidden Magic. A spell tutor might be kind of fun, but that's not what this video is about. But most of these are warfare cards. And you can tutor them with John. And then you have Scoia'tael has a couple tactics. You got Gambit and where is it? You've got Gambit for a tactic, and you've got a couple others. These are tactics. But most of these are nature cards, and you have Fallout to tutor out your nature cards. So you don't need a special card tutor if you already have one in your faction. And Skellige, same thing. You have Alchemies and you have Raids, which can both be tutored either with Vabiorn or Ermion. So you have that. And Syndicate, everything's pretty much a crime. So you can tutor those all out with Cleaver, whatever it is they call him in the tutor form. But yeah, so that's the issue, is that all of those options cost less provisions than Land of a Thousand Fables. You can have one in your deck that tutors the cards you need, and it gives you points when you do it. So they're usually like a 2-point card that tutors out a special card. So you get 2 points, you get the little bit of bonus tempo, you get less provisions to pay for it, you still tutor out the special cards you need. So this deployability can't be enough for the card to be good or played, right? It's just better options. Unless, like I said, unless you're playing Shoop. If you're playing Shoop, maybe you want this. Then we have this order. Transform a special card in your hand into a random unit of the same provision cost from the same faction. And here's where we get into a little bit of an issue. So we're paying 10 provisions for this tutor ability, right? Yeah, we are. And then we have order to transform. So the thing with this transform is, if you're transforming a special card into a unit, even assuming that the unit's just as good as the special card, you're not gaining provisions to your deck, right? So let's say you have Ownermancy, it's a 13 provision card, and I transform it into a 13 provision unit. Sunset Wanderers is the only one that you can do that with. So I say I transform it into Sunset Wanderers. My deck did not gain provisions. The provisions are still the same, right? We transformed a 13 into a 13. So the unit you get from this transformability has to be worth more. Like, it has to be really, really good for its provision value for this to be worth it. The only thing is here that I should mention is there are cards sometimes you can't play. So say you're playing a Scorch deck and you end up in round 3 and you're like, oh shoot, my unit's the tallest. I can't play Scorch. Well, I could down Land of 1,000 Fables, transform that Scorch into a unit. Yes, you can do that. However, I would argue you do not want to build a deck around that happening, but is it something you could do? But that doesn't mean that you want to build a deck with this transformability in mind. And the only thing I want to mention here is, if we're trying to use Land of 1,000 Fables, we really, really want both abilities. We want the tutor from our special card ability. We definitely want that because we're paying a lot of provisions here for that tutor ability. And we want the transform to be good. So like I was saying with the high provision stuff, you definitely want to transform something above average provision value. So, I don't know. Let's take a look at what's a unit that's placed for more than provision value quite a bit in people's minds. Not sure, we'll just pick one here. I'll just pick a card I think's good. Let's look at Artois. So, suppose we made an Artois. That would be good, right? That's really good. Artois' a very strong card, even for his provision value, which is high. So, if you could transform a 13 into him, you would, and that would be pretty good. So, that is the case where you would want to place on the Land of 1,000 Fables. You get the tutor ability, it's valuable. And then later on, you transform and get above a card that you think is worth more provisions than a special card you transformed. The issue is that if we look at Land of 1,000 Fables for a second, there's this little word on it. Random. Random unit. So in this case, you have to have a unit. You have to basically know what you're going to get. You have to have a special card from the faction you're playing, and in the faction you want to get a unit from. It has to be the same provision cost as the unit you want, and there has to be very, very few other units of that provision cost, or ideally none. Because you don't want to transform, well, I'll show you a quick example here. If we go to something that would come off the top of my head here, if we go to Scoia'tael, and we go to 12s, because there is the Orvis Gambit, which sometimes you don't want to play round 3 for traps. Sometimes you draw this round 3, all your traps are gone. You say you want to transform your Orvis Gambit into a card. There's several good options here. Oak would be pretty decent if you're playing a Swarm round 3. Gezeros 2 if you're transforming all the traps. But here's the thing. Say we transform Yorvith's Gambit. All of a sudden we get a random card between Oak, Monroe, Ethne, Gezeros, Philandroville, and Simlas. Now, some of these cards would be really, really bad in that situation. Simlas might just play for 2 cards if you don't have if you're playing a trap deck and you've used your traps up. You might play for 2. Whereas something like Gezeros might be really good. And that's the issue, is that it's random. You can't build a deck around it. If you want to use the transform as the primary ability of the card, which is pretty fun, honestly. If you can use the transform effect for the primary ability, like to play special cards like whatever, in this scenario it's whatever, and you just want a deck based on this transform effect, you have to know what you're going to get. And since it's random, you can't know what you're going to get unless there's nothing else in the provision cost and faction. And as far as I'm aware, that is only the case for one pair of cards in the entire game. And that is Ownermancy and Sunset Wanderers. So this is the only combo, as far as I know, this is the only combo you can guarantee always transforming one card into another one with. And that's interesting. By the way, I'll show a clip. I'll put a clip in here of this because this is a really funny interaction. But I'll put this in here. But if you want to look at the other ones, if we go to what's a very key card? Caltellus. But look, there's no other 13 provision. There's nothing you can transform because it has to be a special card of the same faction. One of the best examples here would be Fuchsia. If you could get another Fuchsia, you 100% would. And there is only one 14 provision unit in Skellige, so you could get Fuchsia, guaranteed. But then there's no 14 provision special card in Skellige. So this is the kind of thing that you can run into an issue with. And if you actually take a look here quick, you're going to want to use this transformability for a high provision card, just because there's less high provision cards less cards in each provision value of high provisions and low. Like there's a bunch of 4s, but there's not very many 12s. Get what I'm saying? But you look here, monsters just have 10s and 9s and 8s. And by the way, there's not a lot of special cards in the game, which is funny enough. Nilfgaard has a couple here. You have some here, but again, the highest is a 10, you get a 9. You're not going to transform Invocation, though. And then you've got Northern Realms, you've got 13. We will come back to Northern Realms. And then we have Sabrina's Inferno. These guys are 8s, 6s. Like, this isn't going to be very big value. Syndicate, or Scoia'tael we already talked about, and I showed you the 12s. That's interesting. If there was an 11, you might actually run it in Dwarves. Because if you take a look here, you have Brewver's an 11, and Brewver's a beast of a card for Dwarves if you get him out. And then you run Nature's Rebukes usually in that deck, so you could Forest Protector. But then you have Saskia, which isn't great, and Vernaciel, which they're both play for 11, which isn't bad tempo plays. So you might actually run this in Dwarves if you're being memey and kind of funny, but there isn't one. And then if we take a look again, take this off. Skellige has a 12 here, but usually you don't want to. Usually you're going to play Blood Eagle, but there's a lot of 12s you could go with. But the thing is, any of these factions that have a high provision one, like there's a bunch of 10s here. There's a lot of 10s for Syndicate, by the way. We'll talk about Syndicate in depth in a minute. But anytime you have a lot of units in the provision value, it makes the transform effect worse, right? So like there's 5 units here for 10. So the issues with Land of 1,000 Fables we come down to are that its deploy effect is more expensive than already available tutor options for special cards in most factions, actually all factions, unless it's a very specific case, such as Invocation, where it's a spell, not a tactic. The other thing is there's some cards that can't be tutored that aren't in a faction normally, so Shoop's Day Off, rather, I should say, is a card you could play with Land of 1,000 Fables. And then the other issue, and they give you more tempo because they play with 2 points, and they cost less provision. So it's worse. It's a worse special tutor for pretty much every card in the game that isn't exactly like a spell or Shoop's Day Off. And then the issue with the order effect is that it makes a random unit from something of the same faction with the same provision cost. Now, those two things together mean that you don't usually get the value you want from its deployability. Because let's just take a comparison here. Most of the tutor cards are 8 provisions and play for 2 points. We're just gonna call that value 4. We're gonna call that value 4. The 2 provisions we're gonna call 2 points. We're gonna call the 2 points 2 points. It's a little bit, not quite exactly, but we're just gonna call it 4 points. So we want this ability on the order for this card to be worth it to give us about 4 points of value. And then I'd say this would be good. The thing is, we're not gonna get the 4 points of value most of the time. Because if you're getting a random unit and you don't guarantee what the unit is, it's not going to be a very, very good card for you. All right, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I just transform a random Skellige unit into 12 provisions from Blood Eagle here, we get Heimdall. Could be good, could be not great, depending on how many units they have. We get Fulmar. Again, could be good, could be not great. We get Herald. We might not even be playing Warriors, so we might not get any value from him, and he won't have transformed yet. And then we have Iced, which we might not be able to trigger at all. So if we get a random unit, although the unit could be pretty decent, Heimdall could play for like 14 or 15. It's not going to give us that extra 4 points of value we would have had if we just ran Heimdall in our deck. You know what I'm saying? Like we just played Heimdall. But that leaves the question of what do we do with Land of 1,000 Fables? Shoop, interesting, and there are 3 things I want to talk about here. 3 specific combos that I think are pretty cool with the Land of 1,000 Fables. First one, Sunset Wanderers. Where is he? He's in here. As you transform Onomancy to Sunset Wanderers, there is a combo I do not recommend you do, but it's pretty funny. If you open Onomancy in your hand at the beginning of the game, especially if it's on the left side of your hand, we're getting pretty specific now, aren't we? You open Onomancy on the left side of your hand, beginning of the game, you have Sunset Wanderers. You play Land of 1,000 Fables, you use it to tutor out whatever, and then you play it. And then what you do is you use Land of 1,000 Fables, transform Onomancy, you don't play it, you just transform the Onomancy beginning of round 1 into a second Sunset Wanderers. So you've got 2 Sunset Wanderers in your hand, you play whatever card is in between them, so they're next to each other, And since they're next to each other, when they move, the leftmost one triggers first. So it moves left past the other one, and then the other one moves left past it. So they just sit on the left side of your hand for the entire game, getting bigger and bigger until the end of the game they come out. It's kind of funny, but you lose an Odormancy really early for it, and it's a really big commitment, and they know what you're doing. Like, this is one combo you can do. I'll put a clip of that in here because it's pretty funny. This is the Sunset Wanderer thing I was talking about, by the way. So you play out whatever cards between your Sunset Wanderers and Odormancy. You transform the Odormancy to Sunset Wanderers. And this is obviously not a great use of Odormancy. You're paying 13 provisions for that Odormancy. You don't use its tutor effect, and you have to draw on the left side of your hand. So we'll go to our next turn. But look, they'll just move. They won't move. They'll just do like a little dancey thing because one moves past the other and they both trigger. So now we're at the end of the game. You can kind of see here, we just waited to the end of the game. We left those on the left side of our hand. Got a 19 and a 16. And just, by the way, don't completely ignore this deck. This is the deck I use when I want to test something. It has all the draw cards in the game in it, basically. So you can kind of see here, they gave us a lot of value. It was one was 19, one was 17. A lot of points, just 2 cards. And it's kind of a fun combo, but obviously you lose out on your Odormancy. And you need a very consistent setup for it by having the Odormancy left side of your hand. It's not very good, but it's quite interesting. You can do stuff like this. And then the other one you can do that I like is Northern Realms, because Northern Realms has Amphibious Assault at 13, because Amphibious Assault's a crazy card, but Amphibious Assault is really good. There's actually 2 very, very powerful 13 provision Northern Realms cards, and they are Drog, if you have humans, and Hensel, which is amazing. So if you can transform your Amphibious Assault here, you know you're getting 1 of 2 units. If you have a deck that can make use of both, they are very, very good. And that deck, although this might sound really stupid, is actually, I might try this, is you can go with a Revenant Siege deck. And the reason why is a lot of Siege engines now are pretty decent, and a lot of them have crew, especially the lower provision ones, and you're going to have Rafard's Vengeance in your deck no matter what. So you can get another unit out with crew from King Hensel if you get him off of this transform. Naturally, by the way, transforming Amphibious Assault, I'm not saying this is the best way to play the deck. I'm not saying this deck's good. I'm just saying you can do it, and you have a guarantee you know what one of the 2 cards are, and you can make a deck where either of them is good. So you can make a deck where you can pull out the crew, get a siege engine out, and then you can also, if you get the Drog, you can transform a bunch of soldiers. Theoretically, the soldiers that are giving your siege engines crew into Revenants, and Revenants, by the way, are still they're still soldiers, so they can still be triggering your crew and such. Where the heck are the Revenants anyway, by the way? Here they are. Yeah, they're still soldiers, so they'll still be triggering your siege machines. So that is a pretty interesting one that I might just make a fun deck about. You can transform Amphibious Assault into these guys. And the last one to talk about here in specific cases is Syndicate. And not because they have a high version special card, where there's very few units, like Northern Realms. More so because if you look at here, they have 10s. And if you look at the Syndicate 10 provision cards, the units that is, they're all really good. So, that's just it. They're all really good. If you're playing a Collusion deck, for example, and you can't get out your Collusion, I'm not saying anyone would ever do this, but if you can't play your Collusion, you can because you only like 1 faction or something. Say it's round 3 and you only got 1 faction, you could transform it to one of these guys. I'm not saying that's a good idea, but you could. And then the other one is, if you look at the other values here, Syndicate has, if we look at their special cards for a second, you see they have 10, 9, 7, and again, if we look at like the 9 provision units for Syndicate, a lot of these are really good, but most of them are specific. In this case, you're getting more of just, I don't want to make a Flying Retanian or a Salamander, although you could put it in your deck, but especially the 8 and 10 version slots, there's a lot of good cards you can make. 10 in particular, these are all good cards. So that's what I have to say about Syndicate. One thing to mention at the end here are the Echo cards, because the Echo cards are, unlike any other card in the game, their values split amongst their uses, right? So let's go Shaping Nature. We play Shaping Nature once, we gain the value of an 8-point boost. Let's call that 5 or something. And then it goes back to our hand, and we play it again, and we gain that 5 again, for example. So if we transformed it after playing it the first time, we'd be transforming the 9 provision card here into a 9 provision unit, and we would have already gained the value of this boost. So that is something to mention. The Echo card's value is across 2 different uses, so transforming them into a unit is essentially a way to gain provisions into your deck. But the thing with most of the Echo cards is that they're generally very, very good and already very strong for the provision value, especially stuff like Amphibious Assault and Ownermancy. So you have to keep that in mind, but it is a way you can transform with Land of 1,000 Fables to gain value if you use the card once and then you transform it when you don't need the Echo effect, the Echo copy essentially. You can transform that and you'd gain value that way. So overall, Land of 1,000 Fables, it's a very interesting card, for sure. I quite like it, but I don't like it enough to put it in a deck to use, like when I'm trying to win games. And it's just that this deployability to play a special card from your deck is done better and cheaper by cards in most factions, and the Odor or Transform effect does not usually make up for it. If there were more special cards in the game, which you couldn't tutor normally, so something like Shoop, if there were more cards like Shoop, where you can't tutor them with an in-faction, like in-type card, say they added a spell that did something crazy to monsters, and Gels couldn't tutor it, and Wispus couldn't tutor it, then you might want to do it. But as it is right now, all the other tutors in the game give you cheaper for the in-archetype type cards. It's cheaper and they give you more points. The more generic ones, Ownermancy is just better, and Royal Decree plays units. And the thing is, you usually want to be playing units, not special cards, when you tutor stuff out anyway. Exception being Heatwave, and Vigo's Muzzle, which are very powerful special cards you do want to tutor, but you're not going to play Land of 1,000 Fables for that when you can just use Ownermancy. And then the Transform effect doesn't give you enough value to make up for the cost of the deploy on the Land of 1,000 Fables, and usually the Transform effect, you will get a random unit, which is usually not as good as having a specific card. So a random 10th provision card is worse than a 10th provision card I picked for my deck. So usually you don't get value here. And you want to make sure you guarantee what the card is, and there's only one time you can do that, which is with Sunset Wanderers. You can get pretty close with Northern Realms, but you just don't usually get the consistency from this, and even when you do get a good card out of it, it's not much better than if you just included the card in your deck to start with. What do you guys think about Land of 1,000 Fables? There's a lot of fun RNG that can happen with the card, for sure. You could generate a second K here or something. You can generate a second whatever. You can do that, but it's not consistent enough to be played like competitively, for sure. But I think it's really interesting. It's a lot of fun. What do you guys use it for? Have you ever played it? What cards should we talk about next? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.